Hello, Low-Code Campfire. Good morning. Episode number 35, where we're going to cover reports and more. And then let me blast through our introduction for anybody who's new. This is all skill levels are welcome. It's a community gathering where we just share back and forth about what we're working with in Plant an App. And we appreciate if you'll bring something to show or be ready to help with ideas and suggestions. We record all the past episodes. I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Dale Warner, head of support for Plant an App. And we record all of these. And so there's lots and lots of hours on our YouTube channel for this and the Low Code Cafe. Our agenda, we just get started, say hi. Generally, we'll go around and start with first call, whatever's on your mind, and then a pretty loose agenda where we'll talk about contributions to our websites, our community, beta, open mic, sing, dance, whatever you want. Very few guidelines, but one of them is to be courteous. If you've got noise going on behind you, please mute. You can submit questions and topics in advance. The email that you got from us should have this link as well. And so with that, hello. Am I getting any better at that?
Good morning, and I guess I'd say you're getting that down pat by now.
Faster. Bogdan does it really well in the cafe.
Yeah. And you have a good DJ voice.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello. All right. So let's jump in. First call. What's going on? Anybody with a burning question?
Well, I have one if there's no one else who has anything burning right now. I have a situation. I'm just curious what other people would do. I have an application that is importing a large number of records from two different sources. One of them is from an Oracle database, and a secondary import comes in from CSV files. Both of them take some time to import, a few minutes, because there's a lot of data that needs to be looked at, and there's also error checking that happens on each record coming in. My thing is how to really display that to the user as they're doing the import, because it does take time. Right now, the way I have it set up is I have an action form that loads up, and, well, actually, I have two. One action form is actually doing the import. I have a form above it that if the query string indicates that it's doing an import, it loads an animated GIF that just basically has that little hourglass type kind of counter thing that just keeps on going, just to give them a sense that the system is working and didn't just hang up on them. And then when the import finishes, the form below it actually does a redirect to then bring back to the page with the listing of all the data. It doesn't always work 100% because there are times that the form below grabs priority. So the form above, which shows that little hourglass, just never loads. So I'm just curious, in a situation where you have the server doing some extensive work or whatever, does anyone have any tips or tricks that they do to kind of display to the user, even something, preferably something that's more interactive, where it can actually update, showing that something is occurring? I don't know if I explained that well enough.
Well, so I got it, and I have some thoughts, but I don't have direct experience. So anyone that has, with that number of records, but I have some thoughts about things that you could do. Anyone with number of records that were?
Ben, Jerry here. My first question is what method are you using to do the import? What does that look like?
Okay, so the first method, just because I was under time constraints, was through SQL. It was a nightmare with regards to speed. The number of records that I was importing, there were some of our clients that were literally waiting 15 minutes for the import to finish. Since then, I've gone and I changed it. So now it's actually using a Razor script. So a 15 to 20-minute import pretty much is whittled down to about 40 seconds now. But then that's just the import. The error check also takes about another minute and a half to 2 minutes. So overall, you're talking about, anywhere between 3 to potentially 5 minutes that a person is staring at the screen, but it's Razor script right now.
Wow, I find that amazing that you managed to make Razor outperform SQL. So I wonder what's going on. You said some of your data is coming in from an Oracle database. So I just wonder how your connections were and how you actually how you're feeding the SQL table that you're importing into.
So okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. The import from the Oracle database, that's being done through a SQL script. There's no way around that because it's a link server.
Agreed.
So that's how I'm doing that, and I'm using an open query. So
Okay.
that's how that information is coming in. The CSV import, that's being done by Razor script. And I'm surprised that you said that I can get a Razor script to perform better than SQL.
Well, at the CSV level, now I'm not so surprised.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah, I've still had that Oracle SQL connection going on in my head, and
Yeah.
Razor would blow my mind trying to pull that off. So, okay, huh?
But my problem is that because it's a token, a Razor script, there's no feedback other than when it has finished running. So basically, if I'm executing the script as an action on the form, that action just basically holds and waits until the token is completed. So that's where my issue is, in the sense of trying to get that feedback. And part of the problem where if by chance, and this is one of the issues that I've always encountered, or lately I've been encountering over the last couple of years, is the order of loading with the modules. There's no way to dictate which module loads first. So if by chance the secondary module, which does the import, loads before the first one, it takes precedence and it locks up the browser. And then the first one never loads, so then they never see that little spinning hourglass thing. And then they're basically stuck staring at a blank screen until it's done.
So, well, let me share my thoughts, what might happen, what might be good. If you can convert that to an asynchronous process, something that's happening through an automation, or that you're using, the async action, and then to have that write some form of progress as it's going along. You could, instead of trying to do the processing on the form that's there, you could initiate that in the background and then have, for example, a grid with a 10-second data source refresh that's looking at your progress table. So if you have 35,000 records to process, let's say, and as it's going along, it throws out a marker, user 7 is at record 7,500, that listing, as it refreshed, could pull information out of that result table and show you're on record 75, you're on record 5,700 of 35,000, that kind of. So it would be even a more informational thing, and then have it redirect when it's done. The other benefits that you get out of that is that you'd be able to see if it hung, and potentially be able to detect errors and send them somewhere else. But it would be remanipulating your code to run elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the only thing is I've thought about like situations like saying basically almost kind of like doing it as a queue type method. So, pushing it off to a background process and then updating something, a table or a record somewhere that, the form or the grid will consistently every few seconds be pinging to get updated information. But like you said, that would require a rewrite of a chunk of logic. So I wasn't sure if that's the right way to go or if there was something else that I'm just not thinking of that people have been able to utilize in this type of scenario.
I don't know if this makes any sense, Ben, but from a user standpoint, if what you do is if you can go out and just grab the size of the import to understand how many records you're dealing with, then feed that back to the user saying you've got 35,000 records to import and it will take you approximately X amount of time, then go on with the process, just so the user has expectation, you've gotten the feedback, and you've not started the big import yet. You've just given them some user feedback to say, here's what you can expect.
It's funny you mentioned that, Matt, because that's actually when I was doing this through SQL initially, that was one thing that I did. I counted how many records because I knew SQL was painfully slow when it came to processing, string manipulation data coming from a CSV file. And the problem I was coming with that was trying to pin down a estimation of how much time. I tried my best, but the problem is that if multiple users come in and they're importing at the same time, the more usage, the slower the server got, and the estimation of time was completely off.
I understand. Okay, just a thought. By the way, thank you for the JavaScript help the other day.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So this was jump in, Mark, please.
Yeah, I have a thought for you, Ben. I was just thinking about something that Bogdan personally proved to me, that an action form doesn't actually load on the page. If you've got it set to manually open, it's not there until you manually open it. And I was just wondering, you're showing your data in a grid, is that right? In a listing?
When all is said and done, yes, all the records are being shown in a grid.
And does that grid, is that actually what initiates the action of sending all that process into action?
It's a combination. I'm using one page. So the page has a grid that has the data. Underneath that, there's a form that just shows doing an import hourglass. It's just a GIF, an animated GIF. Underneath that is another action form that actually does the import. So in the grid, there's a button. You say you want to import a file, sends you to a page that choose the file. When you choose the file, it reloads the page with the query string at the top. The query string says, I'm importing a CSV right now. That will cause the grid to hide and the two forms to show. One form being the hourglass and the other one that's actually doing the import.
Okay, so what if you didn't cause the grid to hide? What if it was already to be opened manually, and you might have to put that in a tabs pro in order to do that? But if it's not loaded on the page when the page loads, but then let's say in an action form you put a little 1 minute timer, or 30-second timer, and then on a button, and then the button would fire, and that would manually load the grid, in which case that would be later. You wanted to delay opening the grid.
So let the form initiate the import and processing under control.
Yeah.
Is really the concept.
Yeah, and the grid. So you could just
preventing one from loading and letting the one that you want to come on first load the second.
Yeah.
Well, then, so you talk about with the two forms that are competing, where the secondary form is locking the page.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you mean. So
later,
if I show form 1 and at the end, or have JavaScript.
Put in some JavaScript that delays for 2 seconds.
Right, and then have that show form 2, and then only when it's shown will forms 2 pre or initialization actions run.
That's true. Yes, I believe that to be true, and I asked Bogdan that very question. He proved it to me that it doesn't really. There's nothing in the page until you manually load it.
Oh, Well, that will definitely, if that works, that will definitely fix that that fight between at least those two forms in this particular case. So at least I can always guarantee that the animation
That it's not just a
is
blank
running.
screen. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
Good luck.
So then this that I have up here, the execute actions async was the one that I was talking about, that perhaps you could just use this construct in your form, and now it's not happening on the page anymore. It's happening in the background. You might be able to use the same tokens that you already have. Your mileage may vary. You're going to have to test this out to see if you can get it to work right. But in that case, then you're going to have to you will have to have something that's going to have to signal that it's done so that it can move on, but at least to get it off the page and not blocked. So that's another thought.
Oh, thanks. I'll definitely take a look at that. But I guess that's if I'm looking to change the logic, so it's
Yeah.
async. But yes, I mean that was the only other option I could think of off the top of my head.
Oh, where am I? Okay,
Much
here we are.
appreciated.
We're back to that.
So I have a similar situation, but mine, when I load an import file, I ended up loading it to a temp table and as JSON, and then so it loaded really quick into the temp table, and then I went and did the async afterwards to go process the temp table, leaving the user to go about their way. The user just got a message that their data got loaded to the temp table, but not not that it got fully processed. So I don't know if that works in your environment.
And not 100%, only because the way my system is, I don't want them to actually see the grid and get to the data until the import's complete. Because
Okay.
I don't want them now mucking around with the data as a background, process is also writing to the same exact table and this and that. I'd rather the import complete. When it's complete, then they can go in and modify their data.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. All good approaches. Somebody else has something we should put first. Come on, Mark. You usually have something for me.
I usually do, but I don't want to monopolize the time. I actually don't have anything that is in my head right now.
Okay. All right. Good. Then we'll go on to our regular things. Campfire website. There was one contribution because I know there was because I made it. If you attended on Wednesday in Low-Code Cafe, we added the event-driven architecture into Campfire so that you can see it and feel it and work with it. And so I've now added a contribution page that shows the whole process or has all the parts and pieces. And so the proof of concept is if you go into this page and you type something and you trigger the email event, this thing is going to be sent to you in an email. It's just a very simple workflow that happens. And so you can then see all the parts and pieces. So if we look for the event raised, we can see that a send sample email was sent with ABC Campfire, raised by the contribution form. You can see the event responses. So we can see that, I should put the date and time on here so we can see it, but you'll see something that says it was sent to you and that it's complete, and that each piece of this you can view the episode, you can view the workflow or the automation, all the different pieces you can just open up directly and see how it's put together. So hopefully that'll illustrate that better than my monotone for an hour, 40 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that before we go on to something else? Anybody see any use at all for any of that? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a great system. I'm thinking ahead to see which of my several sites that would be really good in. Several of them, when the sites get bigger, I know I'm going to want that. So I really like the fact that you put that together for us, Dale.
Well, good. I hope so. One of the things that it occurred to me as I was working with it today was just that same kind of feedback thing that we were just talking about in Ben's case, that one of the downsides of you just raise an event and go on is that then it doesn't, how does the user get to know that something happened? How do you provide the feedback that, and so that proof of concept could probably be enhanced a little bit to find a way to get the feedback and I mean, I'm sure we could do a ton of things with it, but at least it gets the thoughts going. So. All right. Let me see.
Dale, I'll interrupt just for a second. I just want to let you know,
Please.
I'm really, really excited about your last two Wednesday calls on the event-driven stuff. My life and my schedule has been such a way that while you've been teaching us real time, I have not been as attentive, but I have made every effort to go back and rewatch those videos. I'm on like my third pass now trying to grasp all that. But, you know, we at Planet App, we're so far ahead of the world right now in DNN programming. It's just unbelievable what kind of a toolbox we have here. I hope the world will catch on, but thank you for showing us some of these dark side things, because guys, that everybody that's on this forum now, I'm sure appreciate being able to see that kind of stuff. And I, for one, I'm pumped about all of it.
Well, you know, when the light bulb moment for me was when we could just, you know, write a workflow and call it with a token, and you know, all the linkage happens. It's not necessarily as easily comprehensible, but it is low code, right? It just you write a couple of things and it starts responding.
I say this a million times. I still stand by it. We went low code the second my tokens was invented, in my opinion. That's the Action Form, Action Grid, and my tokens. I suddenly am not a C# Visual Studios programmer anymore, you know, but you're right. We are next generation on low code. So I'll hush about that. I could talk that junk all day. So continue on.
You can always pat us on the back. We appreciate that. But is there anybody on this call who doesn't have access yet to Campfire? Because, and I'll try and link in my design document. I will link in my design document so that was there too, that overview. But I just being able to use this as a resource. You just shoot me in the chat your email if you're not part of this. Okay, that's contributions. Let's see what else. Bogdan, you're on. I didn't presume, I didn't see you there. Did you want to talk at all about community in 119?
I think, I mean, next Friday, probably, as you know, Dale is on vacation, so I will be hosting this. So maybe next week we'll get a chance to start the beta, because we have scheduled it for Friday, and then I can give you more information there about what's new. I will also do a demo on Wednesday at the local Café, but I think on Friday we'll have time to get more in depth if you want, and it's of interest to you as well, of course.
Great. And I don't think I had mentioned yet, but yeah, I am going to be on vacation. I passed the COVID test, so I can get on a cruise boat on Sunday. So yeah, I'm going to be real offline for a week. All right, and
Good for you, Dale.
yes. Oh, and I'm just trying to take care of. I'll resend password to you, Jim. See if I can get that done here before we get done. I'm real bad at two things at once, but let's go on. All right. So another programming announcement, I guess. There was the request to do browser console, like Radu demonstrated it back on in here a little bit on, or I don't remember where, on 1.5, but we're going to cover this February 9. That's the plan anyway. Radu will show all about how to use the browser console. I'm sure we'll get into APIs and probably some other things because that's not going to fill the complete hour. So that's where we're going to answer that question. And then Matt had a question about what reports. How do you generate reports? What libraries? What's best? Connecting with data, fancy PDFs. Matt, are you available to talk about what you hope to get out of this question?
Yeah, I'm not sure, that kind of summarizes it. Basically, tricks, techniques, things to get started, things to avoid. In my case, I've got a project where I'm going to be doing some heavy, I would suspect fairly complicated report generation. So if I can get a running start here and maybe help other people as well, that would be great.
I'm just going to start out by saying I don't have experience at all in this one. So anyone with, please jump in.
I'll jump in. First, at least from my perspective, what I would say is, first and foremost, you would want to take the time to develop a templates section for your reporting if you're going to be doing PDF. What I mean by that is, basically create a table where you can generate templates that you're going to be using for your reports. It's going to be such a huge time saver later when you're designing new reports, modifying existing ones, whatever. You don't have to go digging into your code on forms or wherever to see what it was, the HTML that you had, written and modify it that way. It's something that I do quite often. Basically, all my websites have a template section. I create a template PDF basically with whatever tokens, and then I have code that I just copy and paste that will insert, whatever tokens are necessary into that generated HTML, and then pump it out as a PDF and put it somewhere to be used. So if I could give you at least one bit of advice, that would be your first step. I don't know if that made sense.
Yes, it did make sense. Thank you. Does anybody have any experience with any of the libraries, JavaScript libraries out there? What I'm looking to do ultimately is to have some, first of all, I'm not sure yet what the reports are fully going to look like. So, but I'm thinking about bar graphs, charts of different varieties, maybe heat maps, things like that. So I don't know if anybody has any experience. There was some mention previously in this, going way back, about this WOW chart, which is charts and graphs for DNN. I've noted it, not looked at it yet, but so looking for any wisdom or insight.
It's not WOW chart, but we used the Google Charts collection there to create some dashboard type visualizations, and that was pretty straightforward to get loaded on a page. If I remember right, we just wrote Razor scripts to do that way. For more complicated things, we've actually used SSRS, which I know is very, very old hat, but it's still a very powerful way of doing it. If you've got big complicated reports and you're trying to build Word documents, that's still there. I believe the licensing is a little more relaxed than it was back in the day.
Yes.
So I think that's, it depends what the word report can cover a multitude of sins. It depends what sort of thing you're after.
Yeah, I totally understand and agree. Yeah, generally what I'm looking for would be in the realm of kind of personal feedback, if you would, a report about a particular topic, input from users, summarized in presumably charts of some variety, like I said, I'm not sure yet. I haven't gotten to that point in the project, but general thoughts.
Yeah, the Google library is simple enough. It's got very few dependencies, and you can. That was the simplest for us to integrate.
Are you looking to have these reports on screen or downloadable?
They'd be down. Well, yes, but let's assume for the moment downloadable.
Okay, because I've used both WoW as well as the Google Charts. I've used them both. I currently actively use them both. You won't be able to really use the WoW for downloadable because it's a module. It's on screen.
Okay.
So it's not going to be as easy to develop a report that someone's going to be able to click a button and say download.
Yeah.
Unless you use a trick that I showed Mark in how to convert HTML to an image and have them download images.
I want to avoid that if I can.
The Google Charts, those should, I've never done it, but being that it is HTML based, Java based, whatnot, should be able to be converted into a PDF using the built-in PDF tools that we have for generating. All I could say with that is sometimes it can be a little complicated and nuanced in the commands needed to generate the chart the way you want it. I know for me, it took quite a bit of trial and error until I finally got it the way I wanted it to look.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that if you're dependent on things like the Google charts, you just have to be aware or hyper vigilant if they ever change their code and their mechanisms, that it doesn't break your code. Whereas if you're using like the WoW charts, it's a module, and the only thing you really have to worry about is browser incompatibility in the future.
Mhm.
But I know I had it happen to me, I believe once many years ago, where Google did change something. I forgot exactly what it was, but I had no clue. And then all of a sudden, had clients telling me what's going on. The chart doesn't look quite right, or it's missing, or it's off kilter, whatever it is. That's, honestly, the only other thing you have to really concern yourself with.
Thank you.
I lived through that too, Ben. It is when Google went like from version 2 to version 3 or something, and they failed to tell us. But it begs a question, Dale. Some months ago, on one of our Wednesday calls, Radu or someone demonstrated a wonderful graphics package that we were considering building into Planta app. Can anybody remind me of what that was, and did we actually do that? Did we ever implement that or consider it? I remember there was a cow, and they could divide up all the parts of a cow on the screen that everybody was so impressed with. If that helps jog your memory.
Yeah, so I was looking that up in the background, and so all those topics are our integrate anything topic, and I think the particular one was integrate anything mermaid visualizations, and so I'm putting that one on the chat right now, that second one on the chat. But yeah, Radu showed how to do several different ones, and but I don't think there's been any steps to do anything built in.
I think eCharts was the one with the cow. I just posted it in the chat. But for example, we use a lot Chart.js. I think the team uses nearly always just Chart.js nowadays.
So, as a design pattern for producing these kind of reports, Ben, do you in your template structure and is out in a table somewhere, or do you keep them in files? And then do you have like a header part of the template and a detail that you just loop through and keep building on that with a data source? Or
That question's to me?
yeah.
Yeah, so in my template, what I've done basically, I've created kind of like a mini application using the Planta app modules. I can develop email as well as PDF-based templates. They include a CSS section, so you can put in any CSS code you want that's going to affect that PDF generation. There's also a header section, a body section, and a footer section. The main reasons I do that is because my template manager that I've created, I can reference header, body, and footer and CSS from other templates. So if I created one template and called it like the default, and I put a default header and footer, left the body blank, in another template, I could say reference the header from the default header. I don't have to rewrite it. So now if I ever change the default header, any other template that references that automatically also get updated.
Then and when you're running through those templates, do you have different data sources in each section of the template, or you take one giant data source at the beginning, that knowing what everything's going to be needed for all the different pieces?
For the most part, there's two types of data pieces that I've used in my PDF generated, templates, and that is using token params. So that's basically information that I'm feeding in at the time I generate the report. And the other ones are built-in tokens that I just know the names of, and then they just run, and they're built into the actual the report template itself. So when I call, basically, I retrieve the template information, I compile the CSS header, footer, body into one string, and then I apply all the tokens at the time once it's all generated. The tokens that are directly tokens that don't need any parameters or anything just automatically get applied. And the ones that are token params, I feed into the logic, the code that I have, whatever values I know are going to be needed at that time for that particular report.
Yeah, because that's where there's so many ways to come at this problem. It's like, it's good to hear how, solutions that other people are already using.
Great. Anyone else? All right. Absolutely. I'm going to move on to the next question, relation to caching of tokens. And so this is a case where the past parameters are going to be there. And so this was submitted as a question here. I'll answer it by email as well, because I don't think Anthony's on the call. But yes, tokens with parameters are cached separately than tokens without parameters. And so the different, if you pass it at a user ID, various, whatever parameters you pass, they're cached separately. So safe to cache so long as you're, so long as it makes sense in that context. All right. I've got at least one person who is interested to see how to contribute to Campfire. Is there anyone else that's interested in that? Or, I mean, I can.
Please.
Okay. Happy to do it. Just make sure there was the interest. So I am actually going to switch here and sign in as a low-code engineer and make sure I'm telling the truth about all these things, because I don't want to be super user and show you something that you can't do. So this is with the same rights. And so if we were to go to the contributions and look, I'm just going to go to the one I just did so that I know what it looks like. You'll have the ability to go into the form about this contribution, or you can go into edit mode on the page. And either way, you'll be able to access the manage form so that you can see this particular one. So for example, on the trigger this email event button, we're executing that an event has occurred, and we're passing it the name that we want to do and the payload. And so you can see exactly how that gets triggered when you do it. And then all these parts and pieces, you have access to the configuration page. So if you go to configuration, you can see I mean, you're unlimited here. We're all being very trusting that nobody's going to break anything, but you can see the entities, the workflows, all the workflows that have been. So these are the different ones. You can open them, take a look. But you should have full access to everything. The only thing that is a little bit limited is that for some reason, because the side menu, the persona bar, you don't have rights to that. If you want to get files up and down, the place to do that is in downloads. You can put your own content in upload and download that, and that's just limited to your space. Your user ID. From a if you wanted to contribute something, how would you go about it? Perspective. Let's take a look at. Let's see if I can find this. You can get into the Pages menu, and the thing that I find to do that's easiest, and actually I think I stole mine from Ben. But if you wanted to contribute something, first of all, you just create a page for yourself. You'd want to look at the permissions, the way that they're set for any other contributions. But what I do at this point, for example, my contribution, I've started putting them in here by year, but here's the one that I just did, event-driven architecture. You're going to want to give view and edit permissions to low-code engineer so that everyone else can take a look at it. And what I find is the easiest thing to do is to just find a good contribution and duplicate it. And then, for example, this about this contribution, if you make a copy of it, when you make a copy of your page, then you have something there to start working with. Like I say, Ben had a pretty nice format that had some color to it and a little bit of structure. So just make sure that it's editable by low-code engineers. And then once you can build the page without anybody else really will be able to see it. I mean, be in their menu, for example, but no access to it. But when you're ready, go to the contributions page and you simply create a new, and you give it a name, provide a description and the URL. And that will then, that's all there is on this page. And then, every contribution that's there, I take a look at it before this meeting. And if it's ready to go, then we'll talk about it in the meeting. Jeff, Jerry, anybody else? Does that answer the question? Did I skip anything? How to use this?
Well, that's great. It appears, though, that my permissions do not allow me access to that level because I've got read only, so maybe I'm not upgraded yet.
Well, okay, we'll check into that, but it's a role. I'll make sure that you have it, but I'm a little confused. We might have to get into it afterwards. So
no problem. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Dale.
Absolutely. Next question. Matt submitted a whole bunch of questions in advance. It was his year. I think it was the start of the year. He just threw a bunch of them out here so we'd have stuff to talk about, and I do appreciate it. So Querystring, how to use it, how to manipulate it. Matt, do you want to start us off with anything you were hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, Dale, the list I sent you was more defensive in nature. We just didn't want to hear you sing. So
I get it. That's a threat that I put out there.
No, I just
it's well-founded. It's well-founded threat, by the way. Fear it.
At the time, I was, starting to work with Querystrings more, and I just wanted, and perhaps others, to understand the ins and outs of Querystrings. What to do, what not to do, tips, tricks, and so on. Just general in nature.
Okay. And I think a lot of you guys use this a lot more than I do, especially, for example, in JavaScript. I see questions come up in community about about pushing things directly onto the query string and things like that. Oh, the query string token. So let's see if we can go back to Campfire here. So, I mean, just covering the first base, that get colon anything will pull information off the query string line. I suspect that's a little more basic than what you were hoping for. So if I have a query string test, you can do get test. This is a weird one because it's in the test environment, it works a little differently. I'm just trying to think how best to illustrate that. What would you like? Would you like to see an illustration? We can sure do a form. It's easy enough.
Well, I'm not trying to get you wrapped around the axle on this one. It was just, a thought. One of the things that I've run into, and maybe others as well, first of all, there's an enormous a number of kind of JavaScript tricks and techniques out there. That's one area. This token, do we know everything there is to know about it? That's another. And then the other thing I was thinking about, generally speaking, is kind of the API documentation. The DNNSF is mysterious. And anyway, I'll shut up.
Yeah, so this was your question that happened on community recently, and I think you've got a really good, this is the one you thanked Ben for earlier. So no, that was pop-up. That's not the one I was thinking about. It was a great question, but it's not the one I was thinking about. This was one, and I think within here so this was the one I was thinking about. This JavaScript ends up pushing, allows you to modify the query string, and which will can end up impacting other things on the page. So I made a reproduction of this. Let me go ahead and open this up. That uses those two update query string params as JavaScript. So this isn't particularly pretty, but the update query string button ends up pushing option and location into the query string. When you click it, whatever you have there, it will push it up there. So that is if we look at the JavaScript behind that, update query string. That was an execute JavaScript stop execution. So DNSF update query string param, what one you want to set, what value, either a constant value, in this case B, or a token value, you can push on to the query string. I believe there's some.
Can you open that up again, if you would be so kind? So you're doing two different updates to the query string. You're adding option and then the token, what's in the text box. And then the other one, the what is that location, and then B. Obviously they're constants, but.
Right, they just wanted to pass. In this particular question, it was option and loc, and so, you know, I was just proving that.
Oh, I see.
This is a separate thing. There's option and, you know.
So in this context, both of those JavaScript or those JavaScripts both execute.
Yeah, so in this case, now it will add three things: option, location, and client. So if we refresh this and yeah, so we have option, location, client, so you can push multiple things. Yep.
I have a quick question. That DNNSF, that's you guys, right? You created that utility?
Bogdan, Patrick, that's
yeah.
our
The DNSF stands for DNN sharp function, I think. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
I wasn't sure what the SF stood for.
yeah, but but we are in the near future doing an overhaul of it, and actually it'll be do you recall, Dale? I think PAA.
I think it's PAA something.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have some better documentation for it then when we do that. To give you more of an idea of what you can do. So yeah, look forward to that.
So that's gonna be a major breaking change.
No, we'll keep the DNNSF functions there as well. Yeah, no, we won't. We won't leave you high and dry.
All right.
No.
But actually, now that you're mentioning that you're overhauling it, because I have one question. I don't even know if it exists, because again, the DNNSF documentation isn't necessarily very elaborate, if at all available in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But one question that I've always had is, in JavaScript, to find an easy way to retrieve the query string parameters without having to write our own elaborate functions or whatever. Is there a DNNSF function that we're not aware of that?
Dale, it's get URL parts. Since I think if you see get URL parts, I think that's it.
Oh.
Window.location, I think is.
Now, if you expand it, so maybe you can expand the arrow. Yeah, then you have all the parts in there, including the query string. I mean, it should be there if you expand the query object. Not sure why it's empty, should have been filled. Maybe you have to pass it window.location, yes, as Dale suggested.
Yeah, I think if you put window.location, so yeah, there you go. There you go.
So if I wanted to use the
that query, yes, that query, and then I think this should work. Yep.
All right, I'm learning.
I'm writing this down right now because I could definitely use this.
And one of the reasons why that was so fresh in my mind, and I just happened to be able to pull that out because I have used this recently, and specifically because we don't have a function to delete parameters from the query string, but you can use this to delete parameters from the query string. So and that's pretty useful to be able to get rid of a parameter completely from the query string. So
Oh, I've wanted to do that too. How do you do that?
Yeah. So you just do the way I did it is I declared a variable dnsf.getURL parts window.location, and then you do delete your variable name .query the name of your parameter that you want to delete. So it's
you put .delete before .query.
Delete space. You say your variable name is URL, or well, URL wouldn't be a good variable name, but just let's say it is. So it would be delete space URL dot query dot parameter name.
What do you think? Will this work? Oh, that wasn't it. Right.
No, because you have to store it in a variable, otherwise you get a new variable every time you call the function.
Yeah.
And I think you have the other way around as well. So if you have this, let's say this object that stores the entire URL, you can push it back to the URL. I think there's another method for it.
I might be posting a question regarding that in community for more clarification.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So
aren't there standard templates for this?
put that stuff into chat when, or as a question when Radu is doing this again. That should be February 9th, and he'll love getting lots of questions about how do I in the middle of his presentation. Throw him under the bus here a little bit. Okay, that was fun. Good question. So I'll just throw it out for next or another time. Again, I don't think we have time to address this today, but we're going to talk about CRMs and best practices and profile fields. So that's get that in mind. If again, next week is Bogdan is going to be running this Campfire webinar, and largely the topic will be 119, but when we run out of that, or in the next webinar, we'll take up more of Matt's questions and more of what you have to submit. Anybody with and just again, a programming note, we will also, after this webinar, we're going to have the embers for a few minutes. If anybody wants to hang around and just talk with the recording off and hoist a glass of milk or something as we sit around and talk about it, love to have you. But anything that we need to share before we close out?
I just posted in the case anybody didn't see it, I just posted a simple example of what we were just talking about in the chat.
Ah, very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to copy that and we'll put it into the let's see, into the chat, into the links for the episode we posted on YouTube as well. So that's a good.
Thanks, Patrick.
Great. With that, thank you all for coming, and we will see you here again next week.